Hey, as crazy as this may sound, and maybe it's honestly, maybe it's more cliche than crazy, I really do believe that the local church can change the world. I know that's not why any of you are here. I know that's not why you got out of bed this morning. I know that's probably not even what attracted you to church if you feel attracted to church. But I do think that there is something significant there for us that we should lean into. And in fact, for me and for so much of what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks, that's really been the focus of what this Be Rich season that Sharita talked about at the top of the hour has been all about for us. It's literally this idea that we have the opportunity to leverage extravagant generosity for the good of people on the other side of us. That we could somehow leverage our generosity, and that in this incredible way, we have the opportunity to leave the world a little bit better place than the way we found it. And I know it's something that we really kind of highlight and we shine this spotlight on and focus on once a year, but trust me, it was never intended to just be a once a year kind of mindset. In fact, the reason we put so much emphasis into this once a year is that we hope by doing so that maybe, just maybe, it would begin to inform our habits and our patterns and our behaviors so that this kind of trickle-down effect could happen and the world really could be changed. In fact, when Andy started this whole thing a couple of weeks ago, he really challenged us to think about something that was bigger than a once-a-year emphasis. He gave us this really big challenge. It can kind of be kind of hard to get our minds around, but basically, here's what he said. He asked us to try to imagine something different. He said, imagine a world where people, skeptical of what we believe, are envious of how well we treat each other, and they're amazed at how well we treat them. Now, when I hear that, I mean, I immediately kind of get inspired, but then I also think, well, the world's really big. You're talking billions of people, and how could I get people to be amazed by anything? I mean, that's just way too big. And so today, I want us to do something a little bit different, and I want us to kind of bring this whole idea really close to home. And I hope that in doing some things differently this morning, I'm gonna introduce you to a guest in just a few minutes, that I hope in all of this, we can kind of walk away today with maybe some handles on this idea that we actually have the opportunity to change the world. And so to do that, I wanna take what Andy said and I wanna try to shrink it way down to something that maybe we can get our minds around. So imagine this. Imagine the east side of Atlanta, where people who are skeptical of what we believe are envious of how well we treat each other, and they're amazed at how well we treat them. Can you kind of get your mind around that? I mean, maybe close your eyes for just a second if you need to so you can kind of see this, but like imagine our community. Imagine your neighborhood. Imagine your neighbors, maybe your mom or your dad or a brother or a sister, amazed in all the good ways by the church. Amazed by your church. And I know that may not be what brought you here this morning, but I really believe it can happen because it happened once. The early church turned the world upside down, and I believe we have the opportunity to turn our world upside down once again. But I gotta tell you, it requires way more than faith. It requires way more than belief. It's gonna require a lot more than hope, and it's probably gonna require me and maybe you getting a lot more uncomfortable than we're actually comfortable being. To show you how we can do this and to show you just how powerful this can be, I wanna take you way back in time. Take you back about a couple thousand years ago to a small little village called Galatia. Galatia existed right on the northern side of the Mediterranean Sea, and kind of tucked in the middle of this town was a brand new church. Maybe in my mind, it's a lot like our church. It was a church just filled with people who were trying to figure out, could the world really be better because we're here? Like, is it about me, or is my faith supposed to do something? Could my faith impact other people? And while they were trying to figure out that, they were also wrestling with another tension. And so a guy named Paul wrote them a letter to try to help them kind of make sense of all these tensions they were feeling. Because you see, these were Jewish followers who had decided to become followers of Jesus. And so while they're trying to figure out how to make a difference in their community, they're also trying to figure out, how do I merge my Old Testament law of Moses kind of faith that I grew up with, this tradition that I grew up with this relationship with a person? Like, and how do those two things come together? And what does that mean and what does that look like practically? And basically, Paul writes to them and he says, hey, I've got really good news for you guys. You are now free from all of the Old Testament law of Moses. You're free from all of that. You can let it go. And now I want you to focus on this relationship with Jesus. And as you focus on this relationship with Jesus, it should change the way you interact with the world. And so some people were kind of starting to get this and they were kind of getting their minds around it, but other people were really kind of running into some weird places with this. Some people were starting to adopt this idea that, hey, I'm free, so like I can do whatever I want now. Like I can treat people however I want, I can act however I want, I can do whatever I want, it can be all about me. And other people were like, I don't know that that's it. I don't know what it is, but I don't think that's it. And so Paul writes these words, and in these words, I think we figure out how you and I can change the world. He says to them in Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, he says, you, my brothers and sisters, yes, you were called to be free, but don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Like, I know that's pretty poetic and kind of romantic language, but basically he's saying, hey, don't use your freedom for your own good. Don't like take advantage of your freedom. I know this is new for you, but don't do everything you think you should do. To bring it really current, for those of you who went to college, basically he was saying, don't go be a college freshman. Like, I know you were away from home for the first time and you could do whatever you wanted to do, but like doing whatever you wanted to do isn't necessarily good for you. Like there's gonna be some consequences to that. Am I the only one who had that freshman experience? Like, man, my dad's down here. He can tell you all about my freshman year of college, and it was not pretty. But like, that's what he's saying. Like, hey, don't go do everything. I know you're experiencing freedom for the first time, but that's not gonna be good for you. And now that you're free from the law, yeah, you don't have to do some things. You don't have to do things the way you were brought up, but now you have the opportunity to do some things. In fact, you have the opportunity to freely choose to do something and to freely act in some ways that ordinarily you used to be required to do, but now you get to do them freely. In my house, it's a lot like taking out the trash. Maybe you can relate to this. Like sometimes for lunch, I'll go home and it's just me and the dog. We're the only things there in the house, and I'll see that the trash is filled, and so I just take it out. There's no fanfare, there's no celebration. I just take out the trash, and I don't even mind doing it. Like I enjoy doing it. But let everybody be home and us finish a nice meal, and somebody say, hey, Dad, why don't you take out the trash tonight? Immediately, I'm like, whoa. There's like 6 other people in this house. That's not my job. Like, I don't have to do that. Like, why do I have to take out the trash? Isn't that why we had kids? Like, shouldn't they take out the trash? And Paul's basically saying, hey, it's kind of like that. Like, are you gonna say it's not my job because I don't have to, like because you could require somebody else to do it and you're not necessarily required? Or would you go, hey, I know it's not my job. Like, I know I'm not required to do that, but now I will. And in doing so, you actually have the opportunity to impact some people relationally that you never could have had if you were required to act in a certain way. So instead of using your freedom to indulge your flesh or to be self-centered, what I would rather you do is I would rather you serve one another. I would rather you look for ways to serve one another. Now that you're free, you don't have to do all that stuff, but now you have an opportunity to do some stuff. And here's the opportunity you have. I want you to choose to serve other people. In other words, I want you to choose to look around and find people that disappointed you. Find people that hurt you. Find people that maybe don't look like you, or find people that don't act like you, or find people that could never thank you or repay you. Find people that you might consider your enemies, and I want you to look for ways to serve them. And he's not being like super spiritual here, because basically we all know what serve means, right? I mean, like when you see a need, you meet it. I mean, it's not complex. He's saying, hey, you see a need, no matter who the person is, if you can meet that need, I want you to go meet it. When you see something that needs to be done, no matter who the person is, I want you to go do it. If you see something that needs to be done, do it. And I want you to look for opportunities to serve precisely because you don't have to. And when you do this, and when I do this, when we get our eyes up and we look for different ways to serve, something happens inside of us. We deal this death blow to that thing that's inside of all of us that says, I should be served. We deal a major blow to that thing inside of us that says the world is all about me, or that I should be the one who's on top. And we all of a sudden put other people as our top priority. And he says, rather, serve one another. And the way I want you to do that is humbly in love, for the entire law is actually fulfilled in keeping this one commandment. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Guys, don't spend any more time trying to figure out what God is like. Guys, don't spend any more time trying to figure out what does God want me to do, or how can I obey God, or what does he think is best. If you want to know what God wants, love other people, love your neighbor the way you want to be loved. And in fact, it's more than that. If you want to know what God wants, love other people as much as you love yourself. You know how much you love yourself? Love other people that way. And literally, he takes the entire Old Testament law of Moses and he shrinks it all down into this one statement. He says, if you want to know what God wants you to do, just love people. If you want to know how to love people, serve one another. And where did he get it? He's quoting Jesus. Basically, Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? What should I prioritize most in my life? And he said, love other people. In fact, I believe that Paul and Jesus felt like this was such an important idea that literally everything else they wrote is just application and commentary on how we can do this. If you want to know what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus, love one another. If you want to know how to love one another, serve one another. In fact, Paul, just a few verses earlier, he doubles down on this idea in a really dramatic way that would totally change everything for us as a church if we just applied like a little bit of this. He said, for in Christ Jesus. In other words, if you are a follower of Jesus, once you are in Jesus, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Not like, let me give you a list of things that you should do. Not let me kind of prioritize. He says, no, the only thing, the defining characteristic, the trademark of the local church, if you will, should be a faith that expresses itself through love. And I love that Paul doesn't say like, hey, the defining characteristic of a church should be faith in itself, or faith is the only thing that matters, because we've all experienced that. We've all bumped up against churches where the only thing that mattered was faith. And basically that faith kind of keeps people out. It kind of keeps people at an arm's length, because that kind of faith is easy. That kind of faith doesn't require work. Faith that is disconnected from love, or that is void of or absent of love, or doesn't express itself in love, it's what leads to legalism. It's what leads to this eye to the sky. It's this vertical morality. It's me and God and nobody else. Nothing else matters. All I have to do is concern myself with God. And I don't have to concern myself with anybody else. And Paul says, no, that's not what the church should be known for. That's not the defining characteristic of the church. The church should be known for a faith that expresses itself, that literally works itself out, he would say. It's this idea of somebody who is exerting themselves physically. You know how hard it is to work out, especially when it's new and you haven't done it lately, and it's hard. And he said, no, that's what this is. It should be hard. It should be difficult. It should be a faith that just is expressing itself, that is sacrificing itself, that is requiring or demanding work of itself. It should be a faith that works itself out for the good of, because of others. So with that in mind, let me ask you the question that we started with at the beginning. Can you imagine the east side of Atlanta, your neighborhood, your family, your community? Can you imagine the east side of Atlanta where people who are so skeptical of what we believe are amazed at how well we treat one another, and astonished at how well we treat them? That could change the world. And it happened once, and I am convinced that it can happen again. But the only way that it'll happen is we have to decide as a faith community that our defining characteristic will be a faith that is far more concerned about doing something than it is about believing some things. And here's the incredible news for every single one of us. Every single day, we have the opportunity to do what Paul was asking the Galatians to do. Every single day, we have the opportunity to kind of lift our heads up, look around us, and look for opportunities to serve so that we can deal that death blow to that self-centeredness that's in each and every one of us. But here's the thing, even though there are so many opportunities and so many ways that we could do this, I know it can be really hard to kind of figure out what's the best way or what's a way or what's something that I could do. And so this morning, with the time that we have left, I want us to do something a little bit different. I want to introduce you to someone in our community who I think is just crushing it in this area. And my hope is that in hearing her story, maybe you will be inspired to start writing a story of your own. So check out this video, and then we'll move forward.
We make double shot first, and we stamp coffee, and we make shot espresso.
For over 30 years, I was a soccer mom to 4 boys, a wife to a pastor, and I had a little career on the side as a writer. 3.5 years ago, my husband and I decided that we wanted to buy our last house. And so we chose Clarkston, Georgia, which is where we are right now. Our plan was just to move in and be neighbors, but we quickly began to learn about the refugee crisis. 19.5 million refugees live in the world today. After a while, living here in Clarkston, I noticed something. There's no Starbucks here. There's no multi-ethnic, agendaless, comfortable place for people to hang out or to work over coffee and tea. And that may not seem like a big deal, but if you consider that 85% of immigrants to this country have never been inside an American home, or that the coffee shop is an extension of the American living room, what that looked like to me was a big hospitality gap. And I started to think, probably the craziest thought I've ever had in my life. I need to build a coffee shop. I have no business experience at all, but I do know how to gather people, and I've been doing that my whole life. So I just started to gather some smart people around this idea. To give you an explanation of our main mission at Refuge, I'm just going to read what we stamp on our coffee sleeves. As you enjoy this drink, you are providing a living wage, quality job training, mentorship for a resettled refugee who lives right here in Atlanta's backyard. We've discovered that when we take the truck on the road, that gives us a chance to work together with our refugee employees to tell a better story. I really have come to believe that welcome is a powerful force for good. I'm Kitty Murray. I'm the founder, and I kind of like to say the Chief Excitement Officer for Refuge Coffee.
Will you guys welcome Kitty Murray to the stage for me? Hey, friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome. Have a seat.
Thanks.
Kitty, it is awesome to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Yeah?
It's great.
You are such an important part of this community, and many of these people know you're an important part of our community because our volunteers get to drink Refuge coffee every single Sunday.
It. So. I love it. Can I hijack things and just say thank you for that?
Yeah.
Like your church has meant so much to us, and you invest in Clarkston, you invest in Refuge, and you drink our coffee. You hire us to come work here. You volunteer. Last Saturday, I was out of town, and I got to come back to a transformation thanks to you. So thank you. We feel that love from you.
Well, we are big fans of you and of Refuge Coffee. It's incredible what you guys are doing. In fact, before we jump into everything you are doing, I want to kind of talk about this for a second. I know that starting things can be hard, and we've sat here, we talked about this idea of finding a need, meeting it. You found a need, you jumped in, but taking a leap like that can be scary. So can you talk to us a little bit about what kind of pushed you over the edge maybe to take that leap?
Yeah, we've fallen over the edge. Yeah. That's kind of true. Sure. I think the leap to meet needs in others really has to start with a different leap, and that's the leap to know others, to get close to people whose needs might not be like mine. Like, we're all needy, but we have different needs, and often we can tend to just congregate with the people whose needs are like ours, and we can manage that. And for us, what that looked like, 8 years ago, Bill and I were living downtown. We were in an apartment community, and we'd planned to be there 2 to 3 years, and our time was almost up. We were looking to buy a house. And one night over dinner, Bill said to me, "Kitty, there's something in the Bible that disturbs me." And if you know Bill, one, he has a PhD in theology, but two, he is never disturbed, ever. I'm disturbed all the time. And so, and he said, why is it when the Bible mentions a certain group of people, widows, aliens, and orphans, over 100 times, and obviously these are people who are dear to God's heart because they're not dear to many others, they're top of his mind, why don't we have any friends who fit that description? And my reaction was like, ow. Yeah. And I was really defensive. And I said, but that's not true. We've given money, a little bit of money. We've gone on a couple of mission trips. We've done some projects. We're like really woke for our age, And at least we think we are. And he goes, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about friendships. And so consequently, we eventually moved to Clarkston. And I think it's in the video that we really didn't have an agenda. We just wanted to move and be neighbors, and we took our time to be neighbors. And as we got to know the community, the next leap, which there's no way I could have imagined what that leap would have looked like if we had not taken the first leap,
Sure.
And so I think that leap to move towards people who may have needs that are different from ours, but who we may have the resources to meet those particular needs. To move in that direction is just the first step. And then, because it's in our DNA as followers of Jesus, then we start seeing ways to meet the needs.
To do it, yeah. I love that because I know for me, it's so much easier to leap towards problems than it is to leap towards people. Mm-hmm. Leaping towards people can feel complicated. And now I have to get to know somebody and I have to understand their need. But you're able to meet a need so much better when you know the people that you're serving. So I love that you guys moved in, you got to know this community. So the need you found, I find this fascinating. The need that you discovered is this idea of a hospitality gap. So how have you seen Refuge Coffee start to shrink this hospitality gap?
Wow. Well, first let me correct our video because, we didn't know what we were doing half the time. But in it, I say that there are 19.5 million refugees worldwide. There are actually today 70
Wow.
Displaced people in the world. There were more than 19.5 4 years ago when that video was made. And so, but even 19.5,
Sure.
The refugee crisis feels so big.
Sure.
And so to me, what hospitality is this thing of knowing people. Last week, I read a phrase in Galatians 4 that really hopped out to me, and it said, you have come to know God, or rather to be known by him. And this idea of knowing God, who seems so big and bigger than we are, and then knowing a world and the needs of the world, and that seems bigger, I think it starts with building relationships. And so what Refuge does, and I think it's the thing we do best, is we've created an environment for those relationships to form. Not full-blown always, but just for the relationship to start. So to me, it's almost like Refuge is a first date spot. And if I can remember correctly, my last first date was 43 years ago. But I think the deal is that you do something like a coffee shop because then you decide if you're going to invest further for a real meal,
Right.
And so this idea that you can sit down with somebody and get to know them with low risk,
Right.
is a thing. And so Refuge has created an environment for that to happen. And the beauty of it is when people from all these different cultures gather and they're naturally curious about one another and they become fascinated in each other's stories, then great things happen. So there are a lot of great things happening in Clarkston, and we're not doing them, but we did create a space for somebody to sit and talk about that and then for that to happen.
I love this idea that Refuge Coffee is facilitating a fascination amongst people. Like that's, I mean, we are, you're right. We're curious about people and we want to understand and know the people on the other side of us. So I love that you are facilitating and creating these environments that make it easy for us to know people. Because I think one of the things that's so easy is for me to get to know somebody with this idea that maybe I can change them or maybe I can help them be more like me. You mentioned this a minute ago. You called it agenda, like having an agenda-less love, like just loving somebody. How does Refuge and how can we embrace that kind of love to where we have zero agenda, I just want to love you?
Yeah, that idea was very important to me and to us from the beginning for several reasons. First, refugees have fled agendas, political, religious, ideological agendas that literally endangered their lives and the lives of their family. And so the thought that we would say, oh, we have an agenda for you, but hang on, ours is better.
Right.
You know, I just think that's kind of unthinkable. And so what's needed often when we are fleeing from an agenda, and this can mean us too, right? I think we all have agendas in our heads that people have planted there that are not true. They're not true about how God feels about us, who we really are. And we're fleeing from those in some sense. So to have a place where you're just loved because of you and you don't have to do anything is really important. But it also really reflects, to me, the heart of God and the gospel. That, you know, Jesus said, come unto me, and I will give you not rules to follow, not something to believe to the letter. I'll just give you rest. I'll give you breathing room. I'll even take your burdens onto me. And so if my job on earth is to be to others who God is to me, then giving a welcome that is agendaless is important. And we work on it all the time. We find that our agendas creep in and others want to co-opt our agenda, but it's worth protecting to create space like that. I think we do that in our homes for others. There are other ways to do it, but I think it's really essential.
This idea that God had zero agenda when he loved us. I mean, he just wanted to know you. He wanted to know me. He just
And it gives
us.
me so much relief. Like
Right?
I can just rest in that kind of love.
Well, and that we can reflect that to other people. Like anybody can do that. That doesn't require starting a coffee shop or that doesn't require starting some big initiative. Like every single one of us we can love the way we've been loved, which is, it's remarkable. So I know you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. There's some ways we can partner with you and some things we can do. But one of the things that we're trying to kind of figure out as a community here is how do we put handles on that? How do we love like that? Because what are some really clear maybe next steps that we could do, that we could walk out of here and say, yeah, I can start doing that?
Great. Again, it goes back to a really simple answer in some ways. And as a nonprofit coffee shop, sometimes it's hard to tell people how to engage with us. So we've kind of come up with a simple answer that I'll tell for Refuge and then connected to other things. But our 3 ways are: you can drink coffee with us, you can hire us to come bring coffee to you, and you can donate because we're a nonprofit. We need that. And I think that's what you can do anyway without Refuge. You can drink coffee with somebody. My first date with a refugee friend was to Dairy Queen to get a milkshake. Like, you can have those experiences and create them in your home or outside your home. And just connecting with one person can open your eyes to the world in great ways. So that's one. The second is, maybe you don't have a place to hire a coffee catering company to come, but there are other refugee serving businesses in our community, and you can hire them. You can just give to the flourishing of the refugee community in that way, and then you can give. And obviously, we're not the only place to give to, and we love that you all don't just give to us, you've given to a lot of other groups in Clarkston that serve refugees and people that serve refugees worldwide. So I think those 3 simple things: to hang out and drink coffee, hire refugee businesses and then donate. Our 3 starts.
3 starts. Well, I am a huge fan personally, and we as a church are a huge fan of both you and Refuge. And if you haven't hung out at Refuge Coffee yet, you really should. It's an incredible place to be. Kitty, thank you so much for what you're doing in the city. Thanks for encouraging us, because I really do believe that every single one of us can do this idea. We can see a need and we can meet it. So in fact, in just a minute, we're going to do something in our service that I think is really practical and is going to kind of give us a great next step here as a church. But before we go there, would you guys give it up for Kitty one more time?
Thank you.
Remarkable. Thank you. Thank you.